Between 1978 and 1992, around 14 bodies and skeletal remains of young Caucasian females with reddish hair were discovered. All of the bodies were found along the major highways in different states, including Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. One common fact about them was most of them had red or reddish hair. And based on the common physical traits of the victims found, the series of homicides was named Redhead Murders. The killings had installed fear among the residents of the states, prompting numerous questions and concerns. Who was prowling along the highways in search of victims? Why were only red-haired young women being targeted and had their bodies dumped on the roadside? The exact number of victims remains a mystery, and most of the victims had remained unidentified for decades. From September 1984 to April 1985, 5 women were killed in quick succession and were dumped along the roadside. Each of the victims were linked to the Redhead murders. On September 16, 1984, a woman's body was discovered near West Memphis, Arkansas, along the Interstate 40 highway. Soon after the discovery, authorities began their investigation, but were unable to identify the body and struggled to locate her family members. Finally, in June of 1985, 9 months after her murder, she was identified through fingerprints. Her identity was revealed to be Lisa Nichols, a 28-year-old woman and a resident of West Virginia. A Florida couple confirmed her identity as the victim used to stay with them in the past. Based on the evidence found, it was suspected that she was killed near a truck stop and later her body was dumped along the highway. A few months after Lisa's murder on January 1, 1985, another strangled body of a young woman was found near Tennessee along Interstate 75. Most of the internal organs were decomposed as she was found 72 hours after her death. Her age was estimated to be between 17 to 25. The victim was found wearing jeans and shirt and wrapped in a blanket on which bodily fluid was found. More surprisingly, she was 10 to 12 weeks pregnant when she was killed. Sadly, no one was suspected or arrested in this case. Even the victim's identity remained a mystery for decades. Until, on December 6, 2018, the victim was identified as Tina Marie McKinney Farmer through a fingerprint test by the Shelby County Sheriff's Office. She was a resident of Indiana and was 21 years old when she was killed in 1985. On April 3, 1985, the skeletal remains of a young girl were found about 200 yards off Big Wheel Gap Road in Tennessee. Based on the remains, it was estimated that she was killed 1 to 4 years ago, and her age was estimated to be between 9 and 15 years old. Even after the initial investigation, the cause of death remained unknown. The victim's skull and 32 bones were collected from the spot. Items such as her necklace, bracelet, boots, and a few pieces of clothing were also found at the location. Investigating authorities could not identify the victim for a long time. However, a facial reconstruction was done for her skull, revealing what she looked like. Later, forensic tests had indicated that she was born somewhere in Florida or Central Texas. Finally, on August 30th, 2022, the identity of the victim was confirmed as Tracy Sue Walker, a 15-year-old girl from Lafayette, Indiana. The breakthrough came when Othram Laboratories had found a potential family member in the Lafayette area, and the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation located several other relatives who confirmed that they had a family member who went missing in 1978. DNA samples were collected and submitted to CODIS, through which her identity was finally confirmed. Tracy's mother also confirmed that she had reported her missing twice from their home in Lafayette. Tracy was last seen in Tippecanoe Mall with a friend in 1978. After a few months, on March 31, 1985, the skeletal remains of yet another woman were found alongside Interstate 24 in Pleasant View, Tennessee. It was estimated that the victim was killed 5 months ago, estimated by how much the body had decomposed. Based on the pattern of killing, her death was also linked to the Redhead murders. She also remained unidentified for decades, and finally, in July of 2023, through a genetic genealogy test, TBI and Othram Laboratories identified her as Michelle Lavone Inman, a 23-year-old woman from Nashville, Tennessee. Surprisingly, on April 1, 1985, another woman's body was discovered inside a refrigerator near Kentucky. She had died from suffocation and was found unclothed, with a pattern of the killing indicating a link to the Redhead murders. Like most other victims, she also had remained unidentified until 2018. Finally, on October 1, 2018, the Knox County Sheriff's Office confirmed her identity as S.B. Pilgrim, a resident of Western North Carolina. A DNA match had been established between her and her daughter, who confirmed that her mother had gone missing when she was 6 weeks old. However, the perpetrator did not stop there. Again, on March 29, 1985, the skeletal remains of another woman was found along Interstate 40 in Waynesville. Like the other victims, she also remained unidentified for decades. In 2012, from DNA and dental records, she was identified as Priscilla Ann Blevins, a 27-year-old woman. However, the cause of her death remained undetermined. As time passed from 1985 to 1992, similar killings of other women occurred, and they were also suspected as victims in the Redhead murders. Karen Jane Nippers, Wetzel County Jane Doe, Lori Pinnell, Elizabeth Lamotte, Pulaski County Jane Doe, Betty Lou Wisely, Stacy Lynn Chahorsky, and Donna Sue Nelton were similarly killed around that time. Each of these women were added to the growing list of victims in the file of the Redhead murders. After so many vicious killings, the fear of a dangerous serial killer had led to the creation of a task force involving law enforcement from multiple states. In 1985, after the discovery of the Greene County victim, authorities from different states like Pennsylvania, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Tennessee sought help from the FBI due to inconsistencies in their cases. When authorities started the investigation, they were not sure how many people were involved in those killings. As the investigation progressed, the authorities found lots of similarities among the victims. The pattern of killing was quite similar for each victim. Most victims were found strangled, assaulted, and dumped along major highways of the states. In some cases, the assault was evident, with other cases having no evidence of assault. The usual circumstances of those killings were not merely a coincidence. Surprisingly, no missing person report was ever filed for most of the victims, and no one was looking for them. So it was evident that the victims had no connection with their families. This was why authorities had suspected that the victims were probably hitchhikers or were working as ladies of the night. However, after extensive research, they finally linked 4 victims found in Texas and 1 unidentified victim from Ohio as potential victims in the Redhead murders. Around 1985, investigators had finally found a suspect when a man was arrested for strangling and attacking a woman named Linda Shackey. It was Jerry Leon Johns, a 37-year-old truck driver from Cleveland, Tennessee. Investigators suspected him as a potential killer in the Redhead murders because he attacked Linda just 2 months after Tina Farmer's death. Not much information was available on Jerry, However, investigators were quite sure about him as the pattern of his attack was similar to other victims' attacks. According to her statement, Jerry assaulted, strangled, and choked her, and dumped her along the highway, thinking she was dead.
John had came into Knoxville with his brother and went to a strip club called The Catch, and he had spent some money with a particular female down there and had enticed her to come to his room.
Brought up this story that he gave her $200, and he took these two $100 bills and he ripped them in half, and he gave her half and said, "You'll get the rest later." During that interaction, things went awry. Took her hostage, then used her own shirt to bind her by the hands.
And had a gun and pulled a gun on her and had taken her to a remote area.
She asked Johns, "Are you going to kill me?" And he said, "Yes." And she said, "Why?" And she said, "Because you're a nuisance." And then strangled her. He then fled using her vehicle and left her for dead.
But she was not dead and had survived the attack somehow. Later in 1987, her testimony played a crucial role in the arrest of Jerry Leon Johns. Jerry was found guilty and finally arrested. Like other victims of the redhead murders, Linda also had red hair. Despite many common factors, Jerry was not linked to other murder cases. His involvement in redhead murders was not established by the investigating authorities, as they had no strong evidence and further investigation continued. It was very shocking that after so many killings, investigators had no leads about the serial killer. Despite their efforts, authorities came up with nothing, and the cases remained unsolved and cold for decades. But the question remained, how was it that there was no concrete evidence, despite finding so many victims over the years being killed in the same pattern?
A 40-year-old murder mystery appears to have been solved with the help of a Tennessee high school sociology class.
In 2018, a group of students brought attention to the cold case that remained unsolved for 4 decades. Alex Campbell, the sociology teacher at Elizabethan High School, had brought the redhead murders case to the attention of his students. His students started working on the case as their sociology project. According to Alex, the students were very interested and invested in the case.
You know, true crime is one of the most popular genres in America. Not just high school students, but adults get very excited about it. And one of the things you got to have to be a great teacher is you got to have the kids interested, and you got to have them really excited about their work. And so I tried it in class, and it seemed to work really well.
Alex also stated that despite living in the same area, he'd never heard about those murders. He was surprised to know that there was no consensus on whether it was a serial killer or if multiple killers were involved. The target for the students was to discover whether the murders were performed by one man or multiple men. Alex Campbell instructed his students to investigate at least 11 unsolved murders in Tennessee and the surrounding states. During their investigation, the students had collected data from the Doe Network, a database of missing individuals, and they analyzed a collection of unsolved real-life murders. They had worked in collaboration with an FBI behavioral analyst, retired homicide detectives, forensic experts, and an international not expert. To find any leads, they spoke to different individuals who had connections to this case. A former FBI agent helped those students profile a case. However, the knots and ligature were a big breakthrough for the students in the case. They had collected pictures of ligatures and strangulation patterns used by Jerry Leon Johns when he attempted the murder for which he was arrested in 1987. Then they took help from Lindsay Philpott, a knot expert, and developed a ligature signature. Finally, they found a potential pattern among 6 of the victims who were killed between 1983 and 1985, and also identified a victim as Tina McKinney Farmer, who was found dead on January 1, 1985. After researching files, news reports, and all available materials, the students had found enough evidence and reached a conclusion. They concluded that Tina's killer was the same person who killed many other women, such as Lisa Nichols, Tracy Walker, Michelle Inman, and Elizabeth Lamotte, and an unidentified victim. According to the students' research, the killer was a commercial truck driver. They named the killer the Bible Belt Strangler, as the area where those strangled bodies were discovered was within the Bible Belt, a region of the southern United States and Midwestern states. In 2019, after the students' crucial findings, the investigating authorities reopened the case of Tina McKenney Farmer. The DNA collected decades ago was tested again. The DNA evidence made it clear that Jerry Leon Johns was the killer of Farmer. On December 18, 2019, the grand jury of Campbell County, Tennessee determined that Jerry Leon Johns would be charged with Farmer's murder. However, Jerry Leon Johns had died in 2015 while he was in Kentucky prison. Regardless, after decades, Tina Farmer's murder mystery was finally solved by TBI and investigating agencies.
Mr. Johns was a long-haul truck driver, and we believe the connection lies somewhere in there. DNA technology changing has made it possible for us to be able to find the profile on the items, and then that match is what made all the difference.
After the success, Alex Campbell and his student group attended various press conferences, interviews, and podcasts to gain media attention and support in this case.
On a cold winter day in January, my teacher, Mr. Campbell, asked me and my fellow classmates this simple question: how can one person be found in over 250 million people? We looked at each other with puzzled faces, and then we started to make categories like race, hair color, occupation, etc.
But sadly, Jerry's involvement in the other murders was never established in court. After his death, the other cases remained unsolved. It was like those victims had no one to speak for them. But those Elizabethan high school students were emotionally attached to the case, and they wanted to speak for them. They called those 6 victims their 6 sisters and continued to fight for justice.
I think at the beginning of the semester, the students thought that it would be kind of neat, it'd be fun to see if there was a serial killer in their state, in their region. But throughout the project, what happened was the students thought less about finding a serial killer, and they thought more about these people as human beings. And so by the time the end of the semester came around and Will was speaking there at the press conference, the students really had started taking to calling these 6 women their 6 sisters. They said, we feel like family, and because maybe they were estranged from their family can't, put the pressure on and keep the story going. And so they decided that they wanted to become their family and do that for them.
Finally, the TBI made an announcement that Jerry Leon Johns was the probable killer in the Redhead murders, and continued their investigation to tie him to other murders. However, TBI never gave credit to the students for partially solving the case. For the first time after almost 4 decades, the sole survivor of Bible Belt Strangler, Linda Shackey, spoke out when she got to know about the students who helped in cracking the case. In the interview, she told Alex Campbell about her horrible experience and said, "There's no reason for me to be alive except the good Lord let me live." But she did not know that Jerry Leon Johns was linked to another murder until an FBI agent had informed her. When she saw other victims' photographs, she was shocked that most of them looked like her. However, overcoming those horrific memories, she moved on in her life and worked as a volunteer in Christian charities throughout her life, and now she is a loving mother and grandmother. The Redhead murders case is still in progress, and no significant announcement has been made by the authorities so far. The killings of multiple women is incredibly heartbreaking, and the ending of the case without any closure is very disappointing. But many questions remain unanswered. Why were most of the victims left unidentified for decades, with no one searching for them? Was Jerry Leon Johns truly a serial killer? Or were there other unknown names behind those murders?